a new lake or a new body of water can be the lake you've fished your whole life, because every time you go out there, it's different. So first and foremost, the thing that I'm going to look for is doing a little bit of research, because I know when I'm going. You know, we know when we're going to go to, say I'm going to Lake Guntersville next week. You know, I know where it's at. I know where it's located. Now, today, with a smartphone, and I've got every weather app that I can have on there, I can pull up a pretty good long-term forecast and see what the weather pattern has been and what it's supposed to be for that time. So the weather is a key factor, because, you know, if you see there's going to be a warming trend this time of year, it's going to change my attitude. And then also, if I see that there's a cold front, it may change my attitude. Wind finder is another one. I'm going to be looking to see, you know, hey, what the conditions are supposed to be on that day when I'm going to go fishing. And it doesn't matter if it's 7 days out or if you're 7 hours out from when you're going to go. I'm going to be looking at those things. The next thing is I really want to kind of determine the basic type of lake that it is. So is it a river, a natural lake, a reservoir? Is it tidal water? Just the basic style of body of water that it is, because bass act a little bit differently in each one of those. And then the big thing is the seasonal pattern. You know, just a general seasonal pattern. I'm not trying to, I want the fish to tell me exactly what they're doing when I get there to the water, but knowing a general seasonal pattern to be thinking about is going to tell me what areas of the lake to look at. So when I first started out, for sure, and for a lot of years, paper maps were really key. This is a map of Douglas Lake, and you know what I'm looking for when I look at a map is the areas that fit the seasonal pattern. So always on a reservoir, for instance, you know, the upper end of the lake is shallower. It's usually dirtier. It's got more color to it. It's going to warm up first in the spring. It's just an area that, you know, this seasonal pattern is going to start sooner in. So, you know, the upper end of the lake is always like that. The mid-lake section is going to be a little different. And the dam end is, you know, the opposite. On natural lakes, it's similar, but it's more about positioning. So early spring right now, one of the key things is to think that the sun is always in that southern sky, so northerly facing banks are going to warm up first. And this is true anywhere in the country this time of year. You know, you want to be thinking about how the lake is laid out directionally, because that sunshine is a huge factor in this particular winter and pre-spawn period that we're facing right now. So again, those basic layout of the lake, you know, is it a highland reservoir? Is it a lowland reservoir? Is it flat? Is it, you know, are we talking about, you know, natural lakes in Florida? All of that really matters. What I really focus on when I'm looking at a map is looking at where bass are going to be able to spend the majority of their time to make a living, right? Where they're actually going to feed, they're going to spawn, you know, where they're going to be able to live. You know, if you got a lake that has just sheer cliffs and it drops off to 100 feet of water, that's not great habitat for bass to be very successful. I mean, yeah, there's plenty of them that can swim around in open water, but everything in a bass's life revolves around flats. And that is the foundation to everything that I do. So being able to see and locate all those flaps is really important. You know, the number one tool that I have to help me break down a lake anymore, without a doubt, is LakeMaster mapping. You know, if you don't have, you know, updated electronics and you don't have mapping, I mean, there's some apps you can get. You know, you can get LakeMaster on your phone as well. But having these VX maps, especially, I can, you know, depth shade for the different zones that I'm looking at. You know, I can adjust that depth shading to focus on that particular zone that fits that seasonal pattern. And one of the things I always do on my LakeMaster maps is I like to set a shallow water highlight, and typically at 5 feet. And that just is more of a safety factor than anything else. But that 5-foot zone is really, really key. You know, in a lot of lakes, especially in the spring of the year like this, and as we get into the pre-spawn and the spawn, 5 foot and less is going to be a key area to look at. So I highlight that in red, and then, you know, the next zone, you know, I'm going to highlight as well. I like to do it in, you know, 10-foot increments or so. And again, depends on the depth of the lake. Super deep highland reservoirs and things like that, you may want to adjust your depth zone a little bit, just because the deeper and clearer a lake is, the deeper that the bass generally live. Light penetration is a big factor in that. So all of these things are just things to think about ahead of time. When you get to the lake is when you actually have a lot of choices to make. And visually, it's very important to start taking in as much information as you can. So as soon as I back my boat in the water, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the water clarity where I'm at, and I'm going to check that temperature. The biggest thing that I'll tell you, especially this time of year, is don't get too hung up on the temperature. Temperature's overrated. The time of the year and the moon phase are two very, very important factors in determining these movements as these fish start making that migration towards their pre-spawn and spawning areas. You know, in the south right now, I mean, in Florida, they're spawning. In Texas, they're probably fish already spawning in a lot of areas. So it changes in the region of the country that you're in based on the time of the year. It's not a water temperature zone. I can't say, well, hey, from 45 to 55 degrees, they do this, and from 55 to 65. It's a general thing, but I've seen bass spawning in Texas at Sam Rayburn when the water temperature was in the 50s, and I've also seen them spawning when it's in the 80s. So water temperature is just a small part of it. It's things that you need to take into account. It's all part of what you have to do when you get to the water and break it down. The biggest thing that I'm looking for temperature-wise is temperature changes. You know, we talked earlier, hey, when you get there, these northerly banks, they get the sunshine facing them. You get a nice bright sunny day like we had here today, and it can change the water temperature in that area. If you get a strong south wind on a warm day, it can push that water in there and really change the temperature, and the fish really move and respond to that. So you just got to be very aware of all your surroundings. You know, as I started my career, the thing that I noticed about some of the best bass fishermen that I looked up to at the time, you know, Rick Clunn, Larry Nixon, Danny Brower, you know, Guido Hibden, Hank Parker, Jimmy Houston, these guys, their perception skills are really, really in tune with what's going on. They notice little things, you know, they notice a change in the weather, a change in the wind direction, changes in water clarity. And those are the things that I'm looking for as I start actually going out and start to break down the lake. You know, I love to cover a lot of water, and I like to see a lot of things when I'm just first learning a big body of water, because, you know, I can go into one area, maybe where I launched the boat at, and the water temperature is 45 degrees, and I go to a different creek that has a different tributary flowing into it, and the water may be 5 degrees difference. And more importantly, I'm really looking for water clarity changes, and reservoirs especially. You know, that's a big factor. You know, the last couple of weeks we've had huge rains all over the country, and that's something that I keep in mind. I'm following that. I mean, we have such better tools now with the apps on our phone to be able to track weather just anywhere. You know, for instance, for me right now, my radar is on the Red Crest Championship coming up at Lake here in mid-March. You know, we're basically just over a month out from that. I've already got, you know, Lake in my phone. I've got the surrounding area, and I'm watching the weather. I'm watching the rainfall in that area. I'm looking at things like that. I don't like to get on any sites or anything. I don't want to hear where Joe Blow's guide service is catching them or anything like that. He doesn't fish like me. I fish differently. I like to go in with an open mind. I want to figure that out on my own. But general weather conditions, things like that, those are really, really important. So I want to look at all these things. And again, once I get out on the lake, I want to start looking at areas on my LakeMaster map that fit that seasonal pattern, you know, and just start actually breaking it down. I'm always trying to choose baits that are efficient for the particular depth zone, water clarity, time of the year, and type of cover and habitat that the lake has to offer. You know, a shallow lake that's got a lot of flooded cover, grass, brush, and things like that is way different than a highland reservoir that, you know, has a lot of rocky shorelines and channel swings and things like that. But always bass are going to use some kind of route to come and go from these spawning flats. And that's the things you want to look for, is those travel routes. And reservoirs, it's very easy to see comparatively, because they're going to follow those creek channels and ditches and things. You know, on subtler, flatter reservoirs, you know, say like a Sam Rayburn or a Gunnersville, these more lowland reservoirs, a lot of times those ditches and things can be very subtle, but they absolutely use them when they're moving in and out of areas. And then another huge factor is forage. So that's something that is unique and different as you move around to different areas of the country. you know, here in Michigan, we fish a lot of natural lakes, and without a doubt, you know, bluegills are a primary forage for bass all through the year. You know, there's a lot of crayfish. You know, if you got a grass in the lake, there's a lot of crawfish there. So the same is true in the south. At Gunnersville, with all the grass that it is, there's a ton of crawfish that live in that vegetation. But there's also shad, there's bluegill, you know, there's crappie. You go out east into some of the other lakes that have blueback herring, it's different. Here in the Great Lakes, we got gobies to contend with. You don't have to know exactly what they're eating on that given day, but it is important to know and understand the forage and their seasonal patterns as well. You know, the same things happen on the full moon for the other species as well. You know, we're focused on thinking about, hey man, when are we going to get that great spring fishing? When is the spawn going to start? But hey, the crawfish molt on the full moon, the crawfish mate on the moon, the bluegill do after the bass, same with the crappie, perch, you know, everything has its time, and a lot of it is triggered by the full and new moon. So I pay real close attention to that. You see a lot of pushes of bass, even when the water temperature's not correct yet, and they're not in that zone when you get a full moon. They're up there sniffing around, you know, these spawning areas long before the fish will actually get there. So, you know, these are some of the basic things that I like to do and look for in breaking down a lake. When I actually get out there, the biggest thing is I don't spend more than 10 minutes in one area doing the same thing, throwing the same bait, using the same presentation, unless I have a positive response. You know, you catch a fish, you have a follow, you get a short strike, you see one on your Mega Live chasing your bait. Something like that just is positive reinforcement to know that, hey, maybe you're getting close. I mean, it's a lot like throwing darts at a board, you know. Every time you miss, hopefully the next time you're getting that much closer. So I'm just trying to make good decisions, check through areas, fish baits that are efficient, and cover water quickly and keep moving until I come in contact with the bass. The hardest thing that you'll never be able to do is you can't catch them where they don't live. So covering water is a big part of that. You know, spending time on the trolling motor, really using your electronics. Obviously, technology is a huge part of the search engine anymore. And again, LakeMaster mapping is a foundation, but I'm always looking, you know, if I'm idling into a creek, I've got my side imaging going, I'm looking for structure, I'm looking for cover, I'm looking for bait fish. You know, that's really important when I'm on the trolling motor. Looking at my Mega 360 to see the cover that's around me. I'm looking at my Mega Live to see any fish or bait fish pods, anything like that. You're looking for any clues out there. I mean, if there's birds flying around, if I go into a cove on a big lake this time of year in the winter and there's a lot of seagulls around, that means there's shad around, you know, I mean, herons on the points, all those things in nature, everything else that's a predator, you want to keep a track of as well. So these are all just little things, and it's all about having, you know, awareness out there on the water.